Yeah, I think or put it, not to just say like be adjusted, but I think what you're saying is like invest in the faculty, right? Like look for good faculty to do this. And it's okay if you tell me it may not look like what you wanted it to look like, but don't tell me I didn't weld the metal together.
If you ask me to weld you a whale and I weld you a tortoise, okay.
We're just like talking, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I took those," and we were like, "Oh, okay, we should have probably prepped you better before the episode."
Just another week, another episode of the High Tech Podcast. It is myself, William Illingworth, with Josh Swartz.
Josh, that's me.
You there?
Hey guys, hello.
He made it.
I'm here. I did. I found the episode.
Some folks might wonder if we're actually friends. I don't know. I think people get it by now.
I'm not sure. They haven't really been paying attention, I think.
Yeah.
If that's the case.
But Josh and I have, at this point in the week, it's a Monday night. This is atypical for us.
It is.
But we've already been, we saw each other Friday night, Saturday and Sunday, because we spent the weekend together.
Yes.
We're
see each other tomorrow night, too.
Podcasting tonight and seeing Batman tomorrow. I think that we're friends.
Yeah, it's been a whole thing. It's been, it was good. We almost died over the weekend, in case anybody was curious, though.
Wow. Morbid.
Because the house we were staying in, I was pretty sure was going to blow over.
Yeah, it's what I imagined when the wolf huffed and it puffed and it wanted to blow the house down. This is what he actually did.
Except after the wolf took steroids. That's
after the wolf became a Gundam, and that Gundam took steroids.
Yes.
And it was crazy.
It was probably made worse by the fact that the windows didn't close.
No.
The whole way.
It came right through the windows. We were at a beach house over the weekend, just hanging, chilling, playing some board games, doing the fun things, and there was crazy winds. It was outstanding. I was watching my phone to be sure that there weren't emergency alerts, please evacuate.
Yeah. But we braved all that to make it here.
To provide you another episode of the High Tech Podcast, where we actually have a Twitter account. If you didn't know that by now, make sure to like our posts. Look for our episode posts every Tuesday around 8, 9, 10, maybe 11 a.m. Eastern.
It depends if Will's podcast partner forgets to upload the thing he's supposed to do that morning.
You laugh about it and you joke, but on the weeks where I don't do it either, because I know how, right? That means we both forgot. So every Tuesday, look for our posts there. Sometimes I'll do a little campaign or try and get some more connections, but we really do appreciate if you follow the podcast in that on Twitter and share to friends. We'd love that reach. If you want to reach out to us, please do so. Inbox at hightechpod.us. That is our email address. If you have sponsorships, we love those. We don't have any, but we'd love one.
We're fine with that.
Ideas, feedback, or
an animal picture. If you've been tracking with the High Tech Podcast for a little bit now, which could get confusing at times because we're learning. We recorded some episodes out of order, and we're not sure how well we did at making sure continuity for this thing stayed strong. But for most episodes, we started a new thing. We ask for a picture to our wonderful email. So if you're listening to this episode, I'm going to ask you for a picture of a pelican. I'm in a beach-themed mood.
Okay, all right.
So I'd like a picture of a pelican. If you're listening to this episode, hit us up at inbox at hightechpod.us, not US, like Will said, because that's crazy. And send us a pelican.
And we only want pelicans, no pelicans. Last but not least, we have our website, hightechpod.us, where you can find all of our episodes, all of our episode resources, and more specifically share that. It links people out to all of, Anchor, to Apple, Google. Our website is its own resource area. That's a great, easy way to share us to others who might be interested in our content. So we really would appreciate that.
For sure.
Josh, I'm pretty stoked.
Yes.
We have just concluded our first series of season 2.
Of season 2. Yeah, I wasn't sure where you were going to go with that. I was like, technically, we've done one other series.
Right.
Yeah, so this is the end of a series. End of an era. Really, it's not been an era. It's only been 4 episodes, so not enough to be an era. But A great series. I don't know about you, but I was really happy with the way the series came out.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like it started as an idea of this topic of accelerated learning. I mean, the idea has been around for a while. We didn't invent it. Please don't give us ownership of inventing accelerated learning.
We clearly invented this. We
I don't
invented
wanna
it
own
so
that.
we could. Oh, never mind. Great point. Great point. I did
Yes.
nothing. I rescind my statement.
Anyway, but we had some great guests who've had a lot of, I don't know. I think as we'll talk about this, right, in this episode, there's been a lot of like themes we've discovered over the 3 episodes so far that we've done. And I don't know about you, but I found it really interesting. Like accelerated learning is a part of my daily work, however I may feel about that. So it's just been really interesting to kind of dissect it in a non-work environment right now and kind of like just look at it from our avenue.
Well, and even to that point, I think that accelerated learning is not as popular as all types of learning, as education, as master's degrees. Like I can think that I would think that most people would know about an undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
Master's degrees, sure. Everyone assumes that every doctorate is a PhD, right? So people need a little more information there. There's plenty of different types of doctoral degrees, doctoral programs, but I honestly, until I worked with this stuff, right, I never had heard of anything called accelerated learning. I didn't know that you could do degree completion programs where you get your degree done in less time. I didn't know that you could why you would do a 6-week course. Like, until I started working in the field, right, everything to me was a traditional semester. Maybe the trimester. I'd heard of the trimester, but it's just a little shorter. That's it.
Yeah. Or like accelerated wind-term courses. Like I had heard of that.
Sure.
Now I will say I think it's becoming more popular.
Right.
Right. Like I find more and more people who know about it. And I will say this. I think the thing that we learned not to like skip ahead, but in Alex's interview is like some people also don't realize it's called accelerated learning. Like we're just like talking and he's like, oh yeah, I took those. And we were like, oh, okay. We should probably prepped you better before the episode. So people don't always think of it that way. They're just like, oh, well, I took courses in less weeks. I didn't know there was like a term for that.
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting to kind of... Now, I will say this. Like, out of all the people we talked about, obviously one of the people who's had the most experience with it, right, was Justin. So, like, let's just jump right into it, right? So, for those of you, let's just recap, because we know you've forgotten, because it's been so long since you listened to the first episode of this
a rough month of these episodes.
Yeah, and a rough 3 weeks, I know. So we interviewed a bunch of people, but Justin was one of the first, right? So we talked to Justin. Now, we admitted that Justin's been a longtime friend of yours. I've known Justin through work for quite a long time and would consider him a friend. And it's one of those things where, like, we just haven't gotten a chance to talk with him in a while about this topic specifically.
Right.
I don't know about you. I just felt like it was like, oh, I kind of forgot, like, how much Justin has been attached to accelerated learning throughout his life. Like,
yeah, and that's one of those things, like, you just take people for granted sometimes. Like, hey, man, you want to come on and talk about this thing? Like, I know we always used to talk about it. And then it's like, oh, yeah, I forgot. He's designed maybe 200-300 of these courses. I don't know. Like dozens at least, 100, 200 courses. He's taught them. He's been teaching them for whatever we said, almost 8 or 9 years he's been teaching them.
I thought you were about to say centuries. I was like, yeah, that's not true.
Old man Harbin.
He's way older.
But
yeah, no, he's been involved in a ton of them. Yeah,
it's just really cool to see that come out. And then I think our conversation was helpful to see the intent, the good intent in doing it, and what we could accomplish if we did it well. That's for me some of the coolest things about Justin's conversation, because if we just get stuck in it ourselves, Josh and I, we're an echo chamber. Like, we kind of agree on this. Justin agrees too, but I personally haven't taught accelerated. You've not taught it yet. It's definitely something that is different even when you've taught it. Because I think that Justin's perspective, at one point he was saying, like, no, yeah, I think it's hard to get all the learning objectives done in 6 weeks that would be the same for a 14-week course, but I made every effort. I think my students tried. I think that most of my students got their worth out of it. I'm like, yeah, that is really encouraging. That is optimistic that someone could say that, because I see a lot of faults with the system. I don't think it's a great system.
Now, I just want to, temper that statement with the fact that Justin basically was like, yeah, they like just met the learning outcomes. Like, it's not like they like really successfully hit those learning outcomes. It was like they were on fire and ran across the bridge, but they got across the bridge.
They didn't die.
They didn't die. Like, they were alive. They got across the bridge right before the bridge fell apart. Like, that's essentially kind of the picture Justin gave. Yeah, I think, like, at the end of the day, like, Justin's perspective in that episode was very helpful in the fact that, like, we started off, like, let's be upfront. We started off as kind of a bash fest, okay? Like,
Yep.
It's a reality. And there's a lot of things that I think the three of us brought attention to the fact that, like, most of the times this is cramming like a 14-week course into 6 to 8 weeks or something. Like, that's the accelerated we're familiar with.
Yeah.
I know Justin was talking about, like, average is kind of 8 for accelerated. It can be sometimes a little bit different than that, but like, there's cramming in there. And I think as we see through the rest of the episodes of this series, like, one of the things that I keep joking about, to my hot take, is that, like, we try these accelerated courses, and I don't necessarily think the acceleration is the problem. I think the problem is that we just think that, like, we can take this course that was 14 to 16 weeks long and just be like, well, we don't have to change the outcomes.
Right.
Like, it's now 8 weeks. And that's where I think, like, all of us were kind of talking. That's the biggest hurdle, an issue that we feel like this usually has to get around, which is the fact that we have to take all that and say, okay, now in 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to learn it. But then we got in the conversation with Justin, and I thought was really helpful, is that, like, that undercuts a lot of times the purpose of quicker learning, like the shorter, quicker learning model, which we often refer to as, like, micro learning.
Right.
And that people make the argument for accelerated learning, but the whole point of micro learning is that you're not cramming like 10 weeks into these 5 videos.
Yeah.
It's about focusing on 1 to 2 things at a time within a confined period of time to really learn that well in that focused period of time.
Micro learning is taking a large skill and doing a hierarchy of all of the sub skills that it takes to learn the bigger skill, and that hierarchy becomes like 8, 9, 10 layers deep. And so by the time you've gotten from the big top skill at the top, wow, you heard it
so
here
much top
first,
happening.
folks.
Like, it's really high up there, guys.
You know, you go 8, 9, 10 things down, like that little piece of a skill that you're teaching that's a part of 100 other little skills that all add up to that top big skill only gets taught for 3 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, that's the idea of micro learning, and that's an exaggeration, but, like, at the end of the day, you can't do that with accelerated learning because it's still trying to deliver traditional learning in a shorter time frame.
Yeah.
They're different modalities. Like, the end result, accelerated learning is take what we learn normally and condense the time frame. It's what it ends up being. It's not what we want it to be or should be.
Yeah.
But micro learning is break down all of these things that you could learn into the smallest little skills and then teach them incrementally. And I think that accelerated learning should take some lessons from micro learning because it might make it
100%.
more effective.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, as we think about this, though, in the bigger strokes, like, I think that accelerated learning has the benefits that we kind of hear with our student perspectives. Like, Casey's a current student. Alex was, like, not going to be a student. We hear some benefits of, like, what it can do for them and their lifestyle. But the thing that we can't necessarily get to in those conversations that I think is important about highlighting with Justin's is accreditation. This is not a hot topic by any means. We kind of just have to talk about it. But I'll tell you, when I worked in higher education, this is one of those things that, like, every week I dealt with something that had to, at some level, go back to accreditation. Like, we had to deliver a certain thing in a course because of accreditation. We had to make sure certain hours were met because of accreditation. We had to make sure there was 100%. X amount of students. And you know, it doesn't mean anything to the students. The students don't care about accreditation. They care that they get an accredited degree, maybe, if they have a career that cares. But otherwise, who cares about accreditation, Josh? You, me, and administrators, like the people who have to do 100%. The work.
Yeah. And that's why, like, you hear, so, like, we take from Justin's, right? Because that was in the conversation with Justin, we came back to that point, which is, like, in an ideal world where we're not dealing with accreditation, we'd say, okay, we're gonna accelerate this course from 14 to 16 weeks to an 8-week course. We're gonna, like, remove 2 learning goals, right? Because we want to hyper focus on these 3 instead of these 5 goals, because now we're accelerating it. And even though we're trying to cram some more into space, we also want to give space to more focus, right? Or break out the skills or the concepts in a different way. Well, when you start talking that way, you're like, oh, that sounds really beautiful, until you're like, oh yeah, but we're also accredited, so I can't give you 3 credits for this course if I just remove these goals
Bingo.
from the course, right? So, and this becomes the problem. And then you get these students who will say like, well, like, I think there should be less content in the course. And we go, well, you're paying for an accredited degree, and accreditation says we can't give you that accredited degree unless you meet this many hours, and you chose to take this many hours in 8 weeks. So like, that's the reality. Now, I will say, I think the disconnect sometimes is that I don't think that picture is clearly given to accelerated students.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So,
definitely.
Like let's talk about Casey for a minute, right? So like, Casey comes in, we talk with Casey, clearly frustrated, and
love you, sis, but
yeah, absolutely, and she'd be the first to admit that, right? So like, but Casey talked about, we got into with Casey about the fact that like, when she went into the program, it was kind of advertised to her as like, well, you can get through this degree faster, you can do this, you can still
just 2 years
get all this, while you're working, while you're doing this, it'll be very manageable, right? And then she gets into the experience like, what? No, that's not what it's like. Like if I'm being really critical, I think it's like a perfect storm with accelerated learning in higher ed, which is that like, it's a model that could work, but has its hurdles that we have to get around, and we're limited by accreditation. And then it's also advertised. Let's just be honest, it's not advertised the way it actually is.
You ever see those commercials for a Coke? You know, and they're pouring the Coke into the glass, and there's all those fizzy bubbles, and the close up, the pan pull out, the spin to the side, like, it just looks so tasty. And then you get that Coke at a diner, and you take a sip, and it's a little flat, and the taste's not there. And
it's not there.
It's like, that's it, you know? Like, colleges are selling folks that marketing commercial perfect Coca-Cola, and then the students take a sip and they know they've been gypped. But they're in a program. At some level, some folks might have the opportunity to be like, dude, I took one of these courses, I'm cutting my losses, whatever, 5, 6, 7, at even $15,000. I'm done. I'm not going to keep going because this is ridiculous. But most have some sort of grant program, some work reimbursement, or they just have really committed to it. They have to get this degree, and they go through with it anyways. Like, honestly, if today people say like the boycott is the method to break down industries and change our world, like, you couldn't. People won't boycott this. I don't know. Do we need to unionize students to boycott accelerated learning? How are we
and at a certain extent, right? Like, to not just paint a whole bad picture, like Casey even admitted that like the rare instructor that she had that really knew what they were doing, knew the course well, made a lot of effort, Casey learned in those courses, right? And so like, translate that back to Justin. Okay, Justin had students who met the learning outcomes. Why?
Right.
Because Justin cared. Okay, like, let's just be very honest. Justin, as much as I bust on him for all the tools he uses, Justin knows what he's doing as an instructor in accelerated learning. He's designed the courses. He understands the pace, and he's very active with his students.
Yeah.
He has instructor presence.
He cares.
He's there.
He shows up.
He cares. But with that instructor, they just barely make the outcomes. Like, they make the outcomes, but they barely make the outcomes.
Right.
Like, and so but the point is, Casey's frustration is, if we go to that place, is that this is a perfect storm to be difficult. But then we also have instructors who don't understand their LMS.
Right.
They don't understand the dynamic of this class. They've taught this before in traditional manners, or they're working professionals who have no idea how to teach this stuff, and they're just going off of what's there. And then that combined is where we get this unequal experience for students, right? Like, we get this kind of difficult experience in a place because it's a difficult form of learning that really, at the end of the day, we need somebody who's very attentive to their students. We need a course that's designed well to get through it. And anything that slightly falls short of that is going to add to the difficulty of an incredibly hard road that a student has to get across in 8 weeks.
Well, and even with like Casey's best determination, I mean, there are weekends she's at my place, you know, her and my wife are going to go see a play or something. And like, besides going to the play, she's got her laptop out working, you know, and I'm like, this is crazy because I know she's working the rest of the week too. And she's only doing one course at a time. She's not.
Yeah, she's not even doing two at a time. And I can tell you some of these institutions want students taking 2 courses at a time.
Right. Now, this is where I think we did a little show notes prep tonight. We're like, hey, are we going to do this way, or which way are we going to do this, Josh? And like, I think we are landing in the right way. Just like mix match, however this builds in. A Casey survives, may even thrive because of a Justin. And Casey's, though, often get many kinds of teachers that aren't a Justin. And an Alex looks at this all and is like, y'all, he's the boycotter. He's nuts. Like, he thinks it's nuts. Like, why would you subject yourself to this if there isn't necessarily a guarantee on the other side that it's going to be lucrative, fulfilling, uplifting? Yeah. But at the same time, it's going to cost him time. He's going to lose time. He's going to lose money. And it's not going to be fun, helpful, or critically engaging. Like, I love that Alex said, I would love to do like boot camp studies or project focused studies where I can get my hands into something that I'm trying to learn, and even for 2 weeks, 3 weeks intensively, just do that. He's not afraid to learn or to put in hard work at all, but the system that exists is not there to meet an Alex where he's at.
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily, I think I push back, I wouldn't necessarily put Alex in a boycotter mentality.
I hope he would. I want him to.
Yeah, I would. I want him to boycott. I think Alex, I'm putting in the category of just like, he's looking for an intensive, something he can do quickly, and he wants a guarantee. He doesn't want the fluff. He wants a guarantee that he can get a, he's at a point in his life where he wants a guarantee that he can, level up, so to speak, job wise from where he wants to be right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. Especially at the graduate level. Like, Alex is looking at like a post-normal college experience.
Something.
When we're talking undergraduate, I push back against that vibe because that's a whole nother conversation of why I think the humanities are important. But that piece. But I will say this. What we heard in Alex's like needs is exactly what people argue of why they're doing accelerated learning. Right? So like, Alex makes an argument that like, well, I need something that I can get done quickly, that I can do while I'm doing work, like, because I can't just stop working, right? And I need to get done quickly so I don't have massive loans to deal with over years of time to deal with in there. Those are driving factors. I often hear people argue for accelerated learning. Like, you do this quickly, you don't have to pay a lot, you can do it in between your time frame. Now, this is where I don't think people are being purposely misleading. I just think there's miscommunication in the advertising. Because I think it's kind of like, well, that's what you get with accelerated learning. But what they don't communicate is like, well, I mean, you don't get flexibility because you got like 8 weeks to get this done, but you get it done quickly, right? And people read, well, you'll get it done in the midst of what you're doing as, well, I can do it whenever I want.
Sure.
And it's like, well, that's not exactly. So there's these the kind of miscommunications, I think, often between the way it's advertised and what people read that as, like what they expect their experience
to be. Which is fair because most advertisements are a billboard, a flyer, even just the word of mouth of thoughts from a friend kind of thing. Like, it's not the details that are going to prove that it's going to be fun or not. And fun's not everything, but like effectively easy. I put those two words together intentionally, right? Easy in the sense of I can do this in my life, my time, my space, but effective in it's going to train me, it's going to build me up, it's going to challenge me. Making something effectively easy in that way, it's like the joke, the meme that goes around from every undergraduate student to every undergraduate student. There's a triangle. There are 3 things at each tip of the triangle, right? Homework, sleep, and friends. You can have 2, but you can't have 3. At any time, you're trying to make the decision of like your priorities and stuff like that. Yeah. You take on an accelerated learning program. You got 3 things, you can choose 1, and that's the accelerated learning program.
Yeah, that's like, basically the thing.
It's it.
Yeah. And yeah, that's all you get. And that's what we hear from Casey's perspective, right? That like she had to cut things to make it happen. Yeah. Like at a certain extent.
Yeah.
So like it's very interesting to hear those perspectives because like Casey shared a lot of those similar desires that she had when she going into the program. I think her frustration is she's finding this isn't nearly as flexible as I was told it would be. Also, she's frustrated because in her context, the instructors don't know how to set up Canvas.
I think it's a cardinal sin. I think it's like literally okay, metaphorically, just the most painful. I have no nice words for an accelerated course, which is already a tight timeline, and you can't get the course opened the weekend before it starts or a week before it starts. She's told me of courses that start a day, 2, and 3 days into the first week of class. That she doesn't have access to the Canvas materials, therefore the syllabus, therefore her assignments.
It's an online course. Like, this is straight.
Flip
crazy.
the switch. It's not. We all know there's a button you press somewhere to launch it, and that means that people, faculty, instructional support services, all of the above, are not ready to deliver that kind of accelerated program.
Yeah.
If you can't be consistent with that, I get it. If somebody's sick, if somebody has an emergency, that happens. But the stuff that she's told me about is just ignorance.
Yeah.
People don't know
and
how.
Like stuff is gonna happen. Like, I've been in those situations where like a section had to be scheduled last second,
right,
to like get something up and running.
No,
for students,
that
and,
never
the team
happens.
Could only it never happens. But I will say this: I also know that I literally work in a field that does this, and we have the courses ready at minimum, as long as there's nothing holding it up, 30 days before the course starts. Like,
right.
So, like, it's unacceptable for a week and a half to be into it, and they've lost that week and a half, and now the course is like barely.
To be fair to everybody else, and even to kind of pump you and your team up, like, you're a shoestring team. You've really grown. You've got a lot more folks today than you did when I worked there.
Yeah, I know that. I have a lot of people.
But you're still not dozens. You're not even a dozen, right? Like, you are an efficient team that's figured out systems that make sure that is how you deliver teaching and learning. And
I'm not saying you have to deliver 30 days.
No. But
don't complain to me when you're like, I barely was able to get it together by day 5 after the course started.
My point was that if your team can do it with limited resources or more smaller, even though you're growing, that even a small shop with 1 or 2 folks should be able to help and deliver these things, because it comes down to the system. It is the system that drives the delivery of these courses. And if the system's in place, it's going to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ish,
maybe. So like, that's kind of where we've went over the last 3 weeks.
Right.
There's, that's kind of an overview. Obviously, we missed a few things. We missed some jokes we made about Justin. But the overall, like, right, like, so like, what would be our takeaways, right? So like, we've been talking about this now for 3 weeks, right? Yep. There's a lot to digest here, but I think there's some stuff that you and I have talked about over the time of prepping this series that we felt like has kind of come out. So because I'm the one who's starting the transition, I'm gonna put you on the spot first. But you can do like one takeaway, and then I'll do a takeaway. That way, it's
yeah, it's so nice to be the one that transitions, isn't it?
Yeah, you take ownership of it first. You get to be like, hey, it's your job now to give us something.
Now you can answer.
I'm expecting something incredibly profound.
Oh, wow.
So just
thank you.
Yeah,
I hope it makes the website page or the episode page. For me, the encouraging thing, number one takeaway, is the dichotomy. Okay, this polarity.
Ooh, big words. More big words.
Of the good and the bad in this, right? Justin can make it work, can have student, he can stand there, and yet I don't like the system. And so what I hope the takeaway would be that is, if you're going to consider accelerated learning programs, you're going to accept the necessary limitations, but make sure your faculty are Justin's. You do have the choice, program coordinator, who's teaching in your program. And that is 100%. Incredibly important, because the person who's teaching in your program has to be responsive, has to care, and has to be an expert, in their subject matter, but in at least the tools you give them to deliver that learning. They don't need to be a tech wizard. They don't need to be Josh and I, right? They just need to be someone who can use Canvas effectively if that's their learning management system. So that's my number one takeaway. Invest in your faculty if you're creating these accelerated learning programs. Pick the best of the best for your tech purpose, for your personality purpose, because if you throw in somebody, I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm not saying this to be mean at all. If you throw in somebody who's not prepared, who's not ready, who's not good at doing it, it's not going to be a good experience for anyone. The teacher won't enjoy it. The students won't enjoy the teacher. The grades will be lower because the whole thing will be guffed. Like consider the actual real classroom, right? When students and teachers don't get along in those classes, the grades don't usually go well either, right? So there's something to the fact of having good community, having good relationships between the teacher and learner that supports that long term. So, number one takeaway for me, be a Justin, not Justin. Not an anti-Justin.
not Justin. Yeah, I think or put it, not to just say like be a Justin, but I think what you're saying is like invest in the faculty, right?
Right.
Like look for good faculty to do this, and I would add some addenda, like some notes into that one if I can steal your one. I have my own one I'm going to use here in a second, but you got me thinking here for a second. So, like to invest in the faculty, like it's like to what you're talking about. Find the right people. Please don't find the right people at the last possible second. Okay. Like I've worked with programs before where it's like they find the instructor for the course like weeks before the course starts. I know you can't always control that, but like this instructor starts literally 2 days before the course starts. Like give them time to be onboarded if they have not done this before. And I would also say this, it's not just a personal plug because Will and I work in these fields. It's not because of this, but it's like, leverage the people like a Will and I or the departments that do this and let them do what they do best in this area to help onboard your faculty. Maybe it's just because of the situation I'm in, like my own circumstances right now, but the amount of times I've had people go like, well, we need more help. And then we try to help and we're basically told to be like, yeah, but you're not right. Like, and that's like, I'm just be blunt. Like Will and I work in these tech areas. We know what online courses look like. We've built them. We have teams that know what look like them. Let us help you onboard your faculty well, because we've committed our work to understanding how these courses function.
Hey, this is to me the metaphor of that experience that I've had it. You just said you've had it, right?
Yeah.
This is the metaphor, in my opinion. Hey, welder, can you come weld something for me? Sure, here's a draft. This is how I'd weld it. No, that's not going to work. I'm sorry, what? I'm the welder. Like, I literally am the guy.
And it's okay if you tell me it may not look like what you wanted it to look like, but don't tell me I didn't weld the metal together
if you
the right
ask me to weld you a whale and I weld you a tortoise, okay. But I still did the welding. But, that metaphor starts to break down, I think, a little bit. But it's still the point.
I think the whole point is that, like, we've joked about this. Like, your person's teaching a tank course. We don't understand tanks the way you do. That's absolutely right. But I understand how to break out the information that you have about tanks and how it looks online. And I also know how the technology that you'd like to leverage to help instruct your students works.
Yep.
Let me help you in that area. And I think that's just my piece. If you're going to invest in your faculty, allow some breathing room for the technologists of the world, the instructional designers of the world to come in and help you do things in a way that we know from study and research works online.
Right.
And that's all we're asking.
Study, research, and experience. We've been through the courses that failed and didn't go well, and we've had to help the faculty who failed, and we've had to help change the faculty in week 3 because something happened. Like Josh and I,
if we tell you,
we're just representatives.
We're getting really specific here, but I think this is just helpful. If we tell you something is not going to work in your accelerated course, it is not because we want to poop on your idea. It is because we've seen something like that not work before.
Yeah. And
we're just trying to help the student have a better experience in the course, because we know that one little trip up when you're running at 1,000 miles an hour is going to kill someone.
Yeah,
so
it's
like
catastrophe. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why we're just trying to avoid that. So anyway, I think to that, my takeaway, let's consider this takeaway 2.
Bring it in.
Your takeaway was fantastic. So I'm going to leave that at number 1. My takeaway, second takeaway, would be to hone in on the most important things and focus on those in accelerated courses, right? Again, I think it was an interesting takeaway when Justin was talking, right? Is that like Justin shared this where like he used to design courses, and I know I've seen him, that had like a ton of activities.
Yeah.
And to hear him to say like, I overloaded students, like that was way too much. Like I should have focused on 3 to 4 to 5 important things each week and narrowed down to that. And so like while we can blame accreditation, we can take those hours that we're required to have students do and try to focus in on the most important things that get them to the shortest bar of the learning goals. I know that sounds horrible, but listen, it's 8 weeks. You're not going to get them to achieve the beautiful every element you want of the goals. It's just not going to happen. So how can we focus in on those most important things and get there. I think that's one of my other takeaways.
I see that principle come across as like, let's do 3 things well instead of 30 things poorly, right? Whatever the ratio is. But you're right, dude. Like, and that I've seen that apply to the traditional semesters, like the whole
100%, yeah.
The 15 and 16 week courses sometimes get so packed full of things like, oh my gosh, when I've seen some psych courses like Intro to Psych, and you just look at the breadth of information that they're trying to introduce them to in Psych 101. I get that's the purpose. It is intended to be like a cursory
an overview. Cursory overview.
But like, I think we can do psychology and like the history, last 50 years, and current methodology. Like that should be a three-parter there. And some of these textbooks have 45 chapters, and these teachers will assign 30 of them. In a traditional semester, that's a lot. In an 8-week course, that'd kill me. You can't read it. And I honestly, I don't want to moralize this too much. I think that that's very dangerous. I think that education's a good thing morally, but the way we approach it doesn't have to be a good and a bad thing. I think that there's more effective ways and less effective ways.
100%.
But I get really close to moralizing it when a company, an institution, sells a course that says you're going to get X, Y, Z, and then when you take the course, you get most of X, a dash of Y, barely any Z. Like that to me is some bad, that's some highway robbery. You're doing some bait and switch on these people. Like, you're telling them they're going to come out of this course and they're going to understand how to do something, and then they get in it and it's so packed full of crap that they can't learn something at all or effectively. That's one of my biggest, just outside of accelerated learning, that's one of my biggest issues with education, is we're stealing from students. We are stealing from students, putting them in debt, all this kind of stuff, and not delivering on our side of the bargain. So with Josh's positive affirmation here, right? Just focus on the important things. Get it down to what they need to know.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so we all good things come in threes, right? So we need a third takeaway, don't we?
Yeah, we need a third takeaway.
That's exactly it.
We do.
I think that one of the things that stands out to me in the fact of doing this 3-part interview process and then us doing this debrief is that Justin represents the ideal, right? He's the ideal teacher. He's the ideal designer. He's done it so much. Casey represents kind of the expected student, right? She committed. She's in. She's gonna complete it, but she hates it all the way through. And Alex shows us that reason why not, like the person that's not going to try it because it's not really all that worth it for him. I think that in Alex we see the opportunity for takeaway number 3, and that is to make sure your market offer matches with your product. It's a little bit of what I was like just harping on, but if you're going to put something out there and say you're going to get a 30 credit degree in 2 years, it's going to be effective, it's going to be on time, you need to follow through. You can't just say that and then let your program go willy-nilly. It really has 100%. To come back and deliver on that 30 credit degree, teach them something legitimate, and then you can, hook them. When it comes to marketing, hook them in for another certificate, hook them in for a PhD. You want to get them to stay on to your campus. That's fine. But get them through the one program and make sure that program is what it says it's going to be.
I think takeaway 3 would be us speaking to, we've been maybe talking to some of the instructors, maybe talking to the students. It's time for you administrators and the High Tech Podcast to have a little sit down, have a little conversation. And the reality of it is that, we need to start communicating these things honestly,
right.
Because at the end of the day, if we're not, I think it's an integrity issue. I think it's a problem. We need to be clear. And the reality of it is these accelerated courses are not going to be easy. They're going to be difficult, and you need to clearly lay that information out and lay the expectations out for the student. This is what you're going to have to lose for the next 2 years. Yeah. This is what you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah. Well,
this is what you're not going to see your significant other as much. There's realities to taking these accelerated courses, and I think a lot of the reason students are frustrated is because we're not in some cases, the courses are not delivering on what they're supposed to be delivering on.
Right.
Okay, for sure. In some cases, it is just because it's hard to learn that topic in 8 weeks. Okay, it's hard. In case anybody's curious, it's hard to learn Greek in 8 weeks. Okay, so
surprise,
like that's hard. Okay, in other cases, it's that the students weren't given the right expectations ahead of time, and they get into the course and they're like, "Whoa, this is not what I was expecting."
I mean, and let's just put it here for a second, right? If I pipe dream, if I was accepted to Harvard, I am expecting it to be difficult.
Yeah,
there it is. If I get into Harvard,
hear it up right now. You should give Will free education.
Yeah, because this is how that's gonna happen.
Well, they're obviously listening.
You get to literally like give my eulogy if that happens. Yeah, I don't know. I can't offer. I don't have children to can't offer you.
That's a weird,
I don't know what
dark
to
thing
offer
to
you,
give me,
but
that's a little weird.
I bequeath you my eulogy giving if that ever comes to happen. That you got me into Harvard. But anyways, if I go to Harvard and it's hard, you don't hear me as a student complaining about Harvard being hard. I know it's hard. I expect it to be hard. That's the point.
Yeah.
But if I go to your accelerated learning program that's really cheap, really effective, really online, really going to grab my attention, so easy to get done, and then it's annoying the entire process through, right? Like, set them up for success, set the right expectation, and frankly, then if they expect it to be moderately to severely difficult, their expectations will be met. They'll come through on the other side with the satisfaction of completing it, and you might actually get a word of mouth referral. If they go through and you say easy, 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 and even if they do complete it and it's super, super hard, they're never going to refer someone else to do it unless they know that person's a glutton for punishment, right? Like, it's bad marketing to put out the wrong message on the front end and expect on the back end to get a referral from somebody who's completed it. It's not going to work in your favor.
And be honest with stuff like, if you're saying it can be completed in 2 years, but to complete it in 2 years, they have to take 2 courses at a time. Like, tell them that. Be clear about that, because how many students do we hear? Like, even Casey mentioned this. It's taking her a little longer to finish than she expected.
Another semester or two,
and that's because she's had to like move courses or drop courses to do certain things, and I don't know if that was clearly told to Casey beforehand.
Right.
I'm not sure that was clearly communicated that was going to be. It seems like it's obvious, but students don't think about that stuff. Like, they don't think about the number of courses they're taking at a time. Like, they don't think about that. They just hear 2 years, I should be done.
Yeah.
Right, so like I think that's my push in there. So I like this. I think, like, third takeaway, be honest about what the program's like. Advertise what you got. I feel like that sounds super simple, but we seem to have a problem with that. So, can I add just one addendum, takeaway 4, and then we'll be done.
I love even numbers, so please.
Okay, good, because it's real simple. It's 2 words: be consistent. Okay, that's all. That's my last takeaway. Okay, if I think everything we've learned through this, talking to Justin, especially talking to Justin and Casey, it's when we build these accelerated programs and course to course, they're not consistent. They don't have the same kind of experience for students. It's very difficult for students to keep moving from one course to the next over quick paces, and the course is different. Like, obviously certain content's going to be different, so it's going to create a different course. But if like the amount of content that's in each week is not consistent across courses, that's a problem, right? Or like you have residency for a course, or like live meetings that they're required to come to, like Casey was talking about on Zoom, that are like not the same weeks. They're like not the same times or days. Like, I know that you feel like creating that builds a cookie cutter program, or like it's like, oh, it's just like, we've systemized it and there's no heart to it. It's like, no, we're building an environment that makes sense, right? I'm not building a house that goes to a door that just goes outside to my yard from the 3rd level and I fall to the ground and die. Okay, I'm building a house that makes sense. And I think being consistent is going to help that experience tremendously.
I like the house metaphor because I think it fits with our other takeaways, right? If you build the right house, you need to invite the right instructor into the house, right? Like,
oh yeah,
that's the host that's going to make the most of the party. If you put a Justin as host of the party, boom. You put somebody who sits in the sits in the corner recliner by themselves and just mutters all night, like the party's gonna suck. So build the right house.
Welcome to my house. Where's the bathroom? I don't know actually. I think it's.
I don't think I have one of those.
I'm not even sure we have one of those. You figure it out.
Exactly.
You're an adult.
Yeah.
How did that work out?
Yeah, that sounds like most of the accelerated courses I've taken. So. Yeah, I love that. I really think that's an effective way to think about it, and even just process on your own end. If you're an instructional support team, or if you're a program coordinator, if you're helping those kinds of people, how can you build the right house so that the teacher, the instructor, can come in and use it the most effectively? That's it. That's it for me.
Yeah, I think that is it as well. So. That is the Accelerated series, folks. Thank you for joining and sticking with us. If you just popped in for this episode, go listen to the first 3. Don't just listen to us. We have a lot of lame things to say. You should go listen to the people who had real stuff to say for the first 3 episodes. So on our next episode, we are leaving a series and we're just going back to the good old times. We're going to be talking about Adobe Rush as our tool and talking about talking, because we do that on the High Tech Podcast sometimes. I know, it's crazy. We're going to be talking about the amount of time people should be talking within courses and education and some of that stuff. So I won't get into super ton of details because we haven't carefully thought about what that topic's going to be yet. So we'll give you more details next week. We've had some time to think about it. So just a reminder, check us out on Twitter at the High Tech Podcast. You can also email us at inbox@hightechpod.us. Remember that pelican picture. And then check out our website, hightechpod.us.
Or .us.
US. Nope, not or. It's .us. Where each episode is, and we provide tons of resources. Thank you again for joining us as another week as we continue to learn what it looks like to harness technology and even harness different forms of learning in the classroom, right? And we're just excited you can join us again for another week. See ya.
See ya.